Ever wonder why we do what we do and why we named our podcast what we did? More when we come back.
Hey guys, welcome back. We've been getting some requests about doing kind of a why do you do this podcast? And we've been getting some questions about, why we ended up what we're doing. And we thought in honor of Dr. Meg releasing her book, we would also cover this. For those of you guys who don't know us, I'm Dr. Michael Longyear. This is my lovely wife, Dr. Meaghan Longyear. And we practice together in Georgia. And we see things from kind of two sides of the coin, right? Or two separate sides of the argument. From the weird or the woo stuff and to the science or the things that maybe has a little bit more research. And I will preface this too. All research kind of comes with a slant. So just because it has research doesn't necessarily make it more valid than maybe some of the things that we call woo. If you guys, we have a really cool podcast coming up with Dr. Porter, and he's going to go into how a lot of the woo used to be, or allow a lot of the science now actually used to be woo a year or two ago, and how science is really catching up to some of the weird things that are out there. But we thought we'd share a little bit about our story and why we do this, right? I mean, I think in our profession, in healthcare in general, maybe more in what's traditionally called alternative healthcare, although I know there's a lot out there right now about alternatives, probably not the right word. Naturalist healthcare is maybe more natural than it is alternative. And I would say allopathic medicine or drugs and surgery are should be considered more the alternative. But I think people who do our brand of healthcare, chiropractors, acupuncturists, naturopaths, I feel like we're, for the most part, drawn to do it. Like we have a life experience that we go through that kind of puts us into this situation. Like for me, I'll share a little bit about my story about how I ended up doing this. I never had any intention of being a doctor. I never had any intention of working with people. I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I watched Top Gun way too many times. But because of a life experience, fighter pilot was my first thing, and FBI officer was my second. And I found out early on in high school that because of some injuries and things like that, I was never going to have that opportunity. So, again, I was called to this profession. And I know with your book release, I'll let you share first. You kind of were called to this too. You watched me go through school. I remember me going through school, and you were like, why, how could you do that? Like, I would never go to school. And then
never say never.
2 years out of school, you're like, hey, I think I'm going to go to chiropractic school. Yeah. So, just to kind of jump in wherever you want to.
Well, I didn't have a purpose like you. Like I tried things. I jumped around. I wanted to be a nurse, and because my mom's an oncology nurse and I loved being around patients. So I thought that was my calling, but I was terrified of needles. So that ended that career. So I just kind of bounced around in different, medical field jobs. But then I, same thing with trying to find my way of what profession did I want, like I wanted that purpose. I wanted to have something that I worked with people. I had dealt with depression and anxiety for as long as I could remember. So I thought, well, I'll be a therapist. And I tried that. And I thought, no, this just doesn't feel right. This doesn't mesh well. I don't want to be sitting there listening to people like me complain all day about my problems. And then, well, how am I going to know what to do to fix them when I still feel all these problems and this depression and stuff? So then I thought, well, law enforcement, I'd be a great cop.
Yeah, I could just see you as a cop bouncing up to the window. Hi, do you know why I pulled you over?
I would be the annoying cop, I'm sure, thinking naively that it, is more of a sunshines and rainbow kind of, helping people.
What do you guys think? How would the sparkle hair go if you were getting a ticket from the sparkle hair?
I mean, it's a conversation piece.
I don't know if Dr. Sparkles could be, could also be writing you a ticket.
Yeah, so that didn't work out with that profession.
Officer Sparkles.
Officer Sparkles would have been super cute.
That could work out. No, yeah. I don't think so.
No, that definitely was. So no, it was a bouncing around. I didn't have goals of purposes. Like everything that I tried, it was like met with some kind of feeling of, no, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't fit. This isn't something I could see. I wasn't congruent with that career. So then I just kind of got a degree of just something, just get me out of school, being a non-school person. And then, yeah. So I never had a purpose. I never had like dreams. Like you always talk about that. And I love that. I wanted to be this. I had this is what I wanted. There was a passion there. There was a fire there. And
Well, you
some
always
people are
yell at
lucky
me
with that.
about making plans because I'm not a planner, but I had a plan for my whole life. I had the whole thing mapped out and it all got blown up. So now I kind of look at it as what's the point of making a plan? Because it's all going to get blown up. That's why I laugh at you every time you say, but I need a plan. I'm like, yeah, cool. Good luck with your plan. Because it's going to go different anyway.
Tell him your plan.
Yeah, it's going to go different anyway, right?
Yep. And sometimes in the best way possible. I think both of us are very fulfilled and happy with the type of work that we get to do and the people that we get to serve, and finding out things and adding things. And, it's a very very demanding job, but it's a very fulfilling to be able to have that purpose.
Yeah, but why NET? Like, why do you want to deal with emotions?
Oh my God, I love it. Oh, I just want to help everybody with their emotions. I want everybody to be free of their emotions. Sounds like you and your plan thing might be an emotion thing. We should probably get your arm up about that and test
I'm
and
sure
see.
it is. Like I said, the whole thing blew up.
Yep. So we have a negative
we can
plans
just
equal this.
Stuff that further down, step on it a little bit.
No, don't shove it down there. Let's bring it up and feel it and let it go.
Yeah, I know.
And then it doesn't control you anymore, right? Isn't that the key?
Sure.
Isn't that the key?
So how did you end up with NET?
So NET, it was one of your classmates. You were the pivotal person there getting me set up with your classmate, Dr. Denise. And I had been bouncing around from therapist to therapist to therapist and just never feeling like that wound was healing, that it was going away. And she did one session of NET on me, just one. And I remember coming home and just being like, oh my gosh, it was like a light switch went on. I started crying my eyes out. And then it was like the light switch got flipped off and I didn't want to cry anymore. It was such a pivotal moment because normally when I would start crying, I'd see a HSP or ACP. What is the doggy commercials and Hallmark commercials. And I would be sobbing for days. I would be so sad and I just couldn't pull myself out of that. It was like just being so wound up in this sadness. So she did that one session and that at the end of that processing, I didn't want to cry. It stopped. It was almost like I was looking for it. Like, where'd you go? This isn't the normal reaction. And then all of a sudden it was,
lose that thing that's familiar.
Exactly. Something I didn't want, something I hated, that I would be this way for days and days on end, but I knew it. It was familiar, so it was safe. And it wasn't there anymore. And that was the biggest pivotal thing. And then I noticed different people in my relationships with family and stuff, just different. It felt different at future, family functions. Just things were different. And I knew they weren't any different. So what happened to me and all that? And I didn't understand anything. I had no science background. So this was all like extremely, I don't understand what happened, but I know I feel different. And as you know, everything's about feelings with me. That's how I navigate my world. You're the knower. You need to know the things, and I feel. So then when you got the job at Life University, working at the clinic there at the NeuroLife Institute, and then you came home and said, they have an NET club on campus.
Should have kept my mouth shut.
It was crazy. I'm like, I hadn't been able to find a practitioner. That was the other part. When we moved, I couldn't get any more NET. I wanted to, but it was an hour and a half away to the closest doctor that would be able to do this to keep helping me with what was so pivotal after just one appointment. So it kind of got my thoughts going, well, I need more of this. And if other people need this and there's not enough people around, I literally didn't get another session until we moved. And that was, a couple of years later. It was just upsetting. And then I started getting it regularly and it was just like watching myself transform. And now I don't even know who that person is.
Yeah. And like I've watched you do a lot of work, right? And I think writing the book was a lot of work, just like me. Like I never intended to write anything. You were a little bit more intentional with your writing for this. Just having gone through a lot and doing the work. And, it's important watching you go through it, knowing what I went through, watching our patients go through it. I feel like, we've been there, we've done that a little bit, bought the t-shirt, if you will. Not a cool t-shirt at all, but, your heart has scars, so to speak, but we all do. And we all walk our own journey and we all walk through our own unique things and our unique challenges. And it's important to continue to work on that, right? My mantra, and we're still working on your tagline, but my mantra of never accept your new normal, I think that carries into everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're sad and depressed or lonely, don't accept that new normal either. There's
Mm-hmm.
always things that can be done to push past that. I've just seen too many cool things, you know, especially with your journey and watching you grow up in chiropractic, because I beat you there. But you know, having that and going through that journey, I think has been fun to watch. And it's fun to watch the patients that kind of get it too. I know, you know, even our staff, without naming any names, none of them really want to work on their emotions. Yes, my kind of people.
They're all on his side.
But at some point, I think they're gonna have to. And I know a few of them are coming around too. They all love the other work that we do and everything else. But I think it's hard to open up to, you know, your employer and voice some things.
Well, you bring something up
differently.
That's interesting in that too, because I know we've both seen over the years patients that aren't ready to deal with their emotions. We've had, don't believe the hype. He's great. He does his work. I'm so proud of all the work you've done. But we've had patients that have come in and they weren't ready for the emotional work, and they just worked with him because they weren't ready to go there yet. But then they'd end up showing up a couple of years later. And that's when it was ready for them. It was congruent. We've had patients that,
or they walk in the office in tears and I have to do NET on them. And then I'm like, okay, I was okay. I'm going to have you do a session with Dr. Meg.
He's really good at NET though too. So don't let him discount his. Everybody says that you're fantastic at what you can get to. So, and that's why we all know NET in our office, right? Because the emotions are always a part of healing. Don't care what anybody says. Did you see his eyeballs almost roll out of his head with that one?
I'm pretty sure they could hear that. If you're not watching it,
oh my Lord.
Hear the eye roll.
Let me say it again. There is always an emotional component when it comes to any healing journey. Of course there's going to be, and I don't feel like anybody would doubt that. Now, the going into the emotions part, different story, totally understand that. I guess my liberation of feeling the freedom that I feel and feeling as genuinely happy as people say, gosh, you just seem like such a happy person. Definitely, I feel it now. So that's been all the work that I've done, because I didn't feel that inside. I just put the face on so that that's just not a congruent way to live. So
yeah, and your emotions will deal with you. As much as I joke about the emotional side of it and everything, I get it, right? Your emotions will deal with you. That's kind of how I started writing the book that I wrote. Again, I never intended to write anything. I never saw myself in that light. But I stuffed down my injury as much as I possibly could. And, you know, at some point you either deal with your crap or your crap deals with you. And, you know, I think that's where some of our patients get to too, where they see it and they're not ready for it, but eventually they're like, okay, I got this far with this. How far could I go if I actually opened that can of worms or went into Pandora's box, so to speak, right? So I think they're definitely, you know, one of the reasons I started using NET was because I've always worked with really complex cases. I never practiced in a normal chiropractic office. From the beginning, I was working with traumatic brain injuries and, you know, Navy SEALs that had multiple head injuries and PTS and all sorts of really crazy stuff. And what I saw was those complex cases, especially those long-term chronic cases, they identified with their disease. And when you own your disease, you are never going to get past it because it becomes part of you. It becomes a part of your identity, right? And just like I can't put down my last name and walk away from it, you can't put down the name that was labeled you. That's why I get it. Diagnoses are necessary. And I think sometimes people find comfort in being called a name because it lets them know that they're not crazy and there's validation for their feelings and what they've been going through.
Sure. But
But at the same time, I'd love it if we could just get rid of diagnosis. And we should start talking about the physiology, the aberrant physiology, right? You know, my original diagnosis, I'm going to give you the 10-second version on my story. I was paralyzed when I was in high school. And when I first got to the hospital, they diagnosed me with a spinal stroke and told me I'd never walk again. And had my physical therapist lived up to that diagnosis, I actually know a few transverse myelitis patients that don't walk now. And I feel it's because they had a different diagnosis, and most of them were spinal stroke, spinal infarct, or MS, same as my differentials were. But when they got into the hospital, they got diagnosed and labeled as something. So they put them in a wheelchair. And had they not put me with an intern who agreed to work with me on walking every once in a while, I would have rolled out of that hospital. I needed to be my own patient advocate and tell her, you're nuts if you think I'm leaving in that chair. Because I know transverse myelitis patients that are still in a chair and they have movement back in their legs, but they don't have strength because they were never told they could, and they didn't work on it from the beginning. And your brain is a use it or lose it type of thing, right? If you don't use it, you will lose it. So you can go into the hospital paralyzed. That paralysis can lift over time, and then you can still not regain your function, because if you never tell your brain where your legs are, they're never going to reattach. They're never going to make that connection. Even though the functional connections are there, you can lose the ability to actually move and walk. So, and that's a big part of why I do what I do, right? We started this conversation with why do we do what we do, and why is it called what we call it? And I know for me, it's because of walking that mile, right? And I know for you, you didn't share this part yet, but it was the mental health struggles and the going to this therapist and going to that therapist, and then finding NET and realizing there was something better out there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's because NET deals with the physiology. Not that there isn't a time for talk therapy. We have talk therapists that we refer back and forth with, and I think it can be a very powerful tool.
Absolutely.
But talk therapy doesn't get into the physiology, the neurophysiology. And again, I'm biased. I'm the neuro guy, right? Everything's about the brain and nervous system, but it is the master system of the body. So if you don't address the neurophysiology, then it's a little bit of a struggle to make permanent changes and make lasting changes. And I think that's what NET does. That's what they've shown with the research, right? The cancer study and some other studies, that they actually change the physiology in the brain. They divert blood and nutrition and resources from the limbic brain, or the amygdala, which is your emotional part of your brain, and they allow it to go flow back to the prefrontal cortex, the cerebellum, and other areas that are more responsible for seeing the big picture, realizing it's going to be okay, and balance and coordination in your immune system, your body, your emotions, your thoughts, all of those things, right? And we talk about a lot of this in the office with our patients, in that if you don't have good physical balance, you're not going to have good mental or emotional balance. And that goes the other way too. If you don't have good emotional balance, you're not going to have good physical balance. And I think that's why, or immune balance, or digestive balance. I think that's why, something that we've learned over the years is you got to address a whole bunch of things, right? We have to address the structural, we have to address the emotional, we have to address the metabolic, and you have to, clearly address the neurologic, right? And I think all of those things play together. If you're addressing one leg of the stool, you might have some things fix, right? I know a lot of chiropractors and they adjust and they're phenomenal at it, and they get phenomenal results. And, by freeing the interference in the nervous system and allowing the brain to connect to the body. And then for those cases that don't, we're the little bit extra, right?
Yep.
And tying in the other pieces and the other aspects.
Well, we work with heavy things. We do get a lot of chiropractors that send to us, and understandably so. Most people look at me like I'm nuts that I stand in a room all day and do NET.
Well, you are nuts, but not because of that.
Just weird. Not nuts. But yeah, this work isn't for everybody, but that's why I like, hiring our new associate that we have. And I always say, I love that he does more of the structural part of it with the, working on the muscles and all that kind of stuff. That is not something I'll make you cry in my room, clearing your emotions. But if I have to do like fascial release and stuff like that, nope, I'm going to be crying right there with you. So, we all have our niche, our thing, but I feel like everybody's called to that. And, kind of going back to like that journey of, you had things you wanted to do and you had something disrupt you from that plan. I didn't have a plan, and I am the planner, and I wanted someone to tell me what I was supposed to do. I wanted to go and do that and then be great at it and get that feeling of fulfillment that I think most people want, that purpose, right? The reason you wake up every day, the thing that brings joy to your life, all of those things. And I just never found it. There were little bits and pieces, always became the jack of all trades at every job that I worked at. Great. Love having that kind of title, but what's my purpose? What am I supposed to do? And this definitely is it. And that's my stance on everybody can find that. Everybody, you just have to clear some crap out of the way to figure out what is it that you're supposed to be doing. I never would have guessed if you had told me 20 years ago when, back in our crazy days, you'll be a chiropractor helping people with their emotional stress. You'll be a doctor. I would have told you you're nuts. But I'm glad that the life took it the way the universe kind of blessed us along a journey that we had no idea, no plans, and just kind of helped us find the end goal. I want my purpose. I want to help people. And just holding on to that, brings up situations and things that never could have planned.
Well, and I think that's the big takeaway from this, right? Is your plan doesn't always get unfolded for you in your time frame.
Yeah.
Sometimes it takes a while, right? I mean, I was almost 30 when I went back to school. You were after 30 when you went
36.
back to school. So I think it's important that, the big thing for me, I think what my journey taught me and what I try to tell my patients, nothing happens to you, it happens for you.
Mhm.
And that's impossible to really see when you're in the middle of it, right? When you've
Absolutely.
lost your ability to walk, or you've lost your ability to talk. I've had both patients, right? Or, you've got chronic migraines now, or you had a head injury that caused you to, be really dizzy all the time and not be able to go outside or be a part of your life again. It's impossible to see that that's happening for you, but there's a reason it's happening for you, right? And if you want to get into the woo, the universe, God, whatever the way you look at it, they don't put anything in front of you that you can't overcome. And most of the time, those things that are put in front of you, they're put in front of you to make you stronger. I could throw cliches out all day, right? What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. This too shall pass. Like, all of those things are a big part of it, but it's happening for you. And sometimes your purpose is found in that struggle. Dr. Hall, one of my mentors, he always said, we should sharpen our swords on each other because the world is going to try to break it off. So if we can, use our own struggles, our own things to sharpen our sword to make us better, that's going to put us further ahead. And use your journey. It's hard to stay positive all the time, right? Unless you're this one bouncing off the walls all the time. But it's hard to stay positive in the face of adversity and through a lot of those things. But that's what I mean by never accept your new normal, because your brain is always changing, your body's always changing, and more importantly, your life is always changing. And, I think whatever you're going through, whatever struggle it is, don't identify with it, right? I think that's something we both have seen with NET and with the work that we do. If you have a chronic condition, I'll throw a few of these out there: Lyme, MS, concussion, autoimmunity of any kind. A lot of people identify with that. Multiple chemical sensitivities, that's one that a lot of people just seem to, it's like their badge, right? That, oh, I have this. If you keep identifying with that, the symptoms are maybe never going to get better. But if you say, just shift your verbiage a little bit, say, I struggle with this now.
I'm
Or
healing from
I'm
this.
healing from this, or I'm having to work through this issue, right? We have one patient, again, I'm not going to say her name or the disease, but she was labeled with a disease and she is convinced she doesn't have it. She sends me research articles constantly about the misdiagnosis of this, that, or that. And she's like, do you think this could be me? Absolutely. If you don't believe you have the disease, don't believe it. I'm all for it. And I think it's why she's still walking, to be quite honest. Because I think had she succumbed to it, she might be in a different place. So I think for me, the takeaway from all of this is we do what we do because of the scars on our heart, if you will, or the things that we've been through. And, read her book and you'll feel her story too. But, we are where we're at because we were called here. And I think we were called here because that purpose was laid in front of us.
Agreed. I'd say the same as far as a takeaway. I know my emotions, as you always like to say, are messy, but
and
we've all
made up, completely fake, by the way.
But we all have scars. And if I've learned nothing, and that's kind of what was the oomph for pushing out my book and actually releasing all of the things that I shared and whatnot, is that I felt alone going through the things that I went through. And even though not everybody maybe had a traumatic injury like you went through, there's a lot of people that out there that have. And sometimes you just need hope that other people know what it's like, what you're going through, because maybe your family and stuff doesn't know what it is. Like you always talked about that, like somebody has a concussion, you can't see the wound on their arm, knowing that they're suffering and going through it. Well, the depression and anxiety can be the exact same way. And people don't understand if they don't understand. I've had people actually reach out and comment about the book, like it was just so heavy and like I can't relate to anything you're talking about. Awesome for you. I am thrilled. But the majority of people that I sit in front of and do work with each day do feel that way. And maybe they had a horrible childhood. Maybe they had a horrible life, or maybe they had a princess life. Like I didn't have a bad life, but I still was suffering from something that was real. And my thoughts were horrible. And that doesn't discount like people that'll make comments and say things like, well, my life wasn't that bad, or it's not that big of a deal. Don't discount it. There's something there that's trying to break free and release. And there's ways and things that you can do. And a lot of people do find different, therapy to be beneficial. A lot of the therapists that, we refer to, they all do NET, but then they can expand on it so we can talk more about some of the things. And that's important too. But there's always something that you can do. And especially if you notice yourself being triggered by things, or you notice yourself being obsessed with, your diagnosis, or, different ailments or things that you have, it's your body trying to communicate something's not okay here. So let's dive in, let's dig in and figure out what is it? Because 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be able to figure out what it is. And that's probably the coolest thing I think we would all agree when we do NET is some of the stuff that things connect back to, and patients will be like, I completely haven't thought about that in so long. I can't believe that's even a thing. And then the emotions come up in the release. And it's like, yeah, you've been holding on to that story and that emotional charge for all these years. Let's unburden it so that your body can do the amazing stuff that it knows how to do and heal yourself at a different level.
Or stuff it down. Either one. And it'll come out. It'll claw its way out, right? That's where you wake up at 4:30 in the morning crying.
Writing a book.
And writing stuff down to get rid of the emotions. Because if you don't deal with it, it'll deal with you.
Yep.
But, make sure you're always, learning from what it is that you go through. As long as you learn something from it, there's no failure. I forget who the quote is from, but there's no such thing as failure, just lessons. Mm-hmm. And if you attack life with that idea or that thought process, I think you'll get a lot further. Never accept your new normal and just keep pushing through.
Awesome.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next time. I think we're going to do Dr. Porter is going to be the next podcast.
Couple out.
Or he'll be a couple out. Never mind.
Yeah.
I have no idea what's going on.
He's coming.
I just sit here and look pretty. I have no idea what's going on.
If you're interested in getting either of our books, links will be below so that you can click on those and read, because his story is pretty amazing too. So if you haven't read his book, even though you've been saying all about my book, your book's pretty phenomenal. I was reading it again the other day. So if you haven't checked out our books, check them out. They're pretty awesome, and maybe they'll help you. Maybe they'll help somebody that's struggling.